the record? All right. Well, we are thrilled to be here today with all of you at St. Charles Community College to talk about open education and inclusive practices, how these can enhance your classroom and improve your student learning experiences. So just really thrilled to be here at during your week-long professional development period. So thank you for inviting us, Teresa. If you would like to, we'd be interested in seeing what subject you teach. If you as you're introducing yourself in there, if you want to pop in your subject, that would be wonderful. So very quickly, we'll do a few introductions, a little icebreaker here in a minute, and then we'll get into just a really brief overview of OER and open pedagogy, which is kind of the umbrella term for those inclusive practices that are used in an OER with an OER foundation. Then you'll have a session on inclusive resources, a session on student choice, and then a little presentation on diverse scholarly voices from the three of us speakers. And that'll take us through probably the midpoint of the hour, maybe just a little bit beyond that. And then we're going to invite you to go into breakout rooms, choose one of those topics, and take a deeper dive, ask some questions, an opportunity for all of you to share what your interests might be, or other things you've already found in that area that you want to share with your colleagues. Oh, thank you so much. It's wonderful to see people sharing their disciplines here. All right. So once again, I'm Una Daly, the director of the Community College Consortium for OER, and I'm here with my colleagues who I will let introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Liz Yada. I work with Una at CCCOER, and I work remotely from Southern California.
Hello, I am an instructional designer, as well as the OER coordinator for the Maricopa Community Colleges in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm also the VP of membership for CCCOER.
Liz and I are thrilled to have Debbie here with us today. Maricopa Community College has been a national leader in the OER space for well over a decade, and we've had the opportunity to work with Debbie for quite some time and her other colleagues there, and they're just really a huge role model for colleges and districts throughout the country. History and accounting, oh boy, I love it. So for those of you who haven't had an overview of CCCOER, you are a member, and you're one of two colleges in Missouri that are members. And the other one is St. Louis Community Colleges. But here's a map where you can kind of see the distribution of our colleges. We also have several colleges up in Canada, and that's a growing area, several community colleges up there. So we are a community of practice, supporting and encouraging collaborative development of open educational programs to ensure equitable access, success, and sustainability. And that link, thank you so much, Liz, for putting the link in the bottom of the page here. That takes you to our email. You can sign up for our free email list. It's for educators. All of our activities throughout the year, our monthly webinars, our other activities, primarily virtual, but some in person, are announced on that list. So it's an opportunity to find out about those things. And of course, you're most welcome to join us. And before I forget, we have a wonderful conference coming up in Edmonton, Alberta. Our parent organization is Open Education Global, and we have members throughout the world. This one is focused on building a sustainable world through open education. It's going to be a deep dive into the Indigenous world up in Edmonton, which is one of the largest, has the largest population of First Nations in Canada. It's also carbon neutral. There's going to be some amazing keynote speakers who are educators from First Nations backgrounds. Not all, but most of our keynotes are. There's social activities, participants from around the world talking about their projects, and there's discounts for you. So do consider that conference if it's an option for you. And there's a link here at the bottom of the page. And Liz, if you could put that in there, people can check that out a little bit more. All right. Over to you, Liz.
Right. So I'm going to switch over to Mentimeter. I've just put the link in there. Let me share my screen. So we want to know, how was your summer? So just with Okay, with one word answers. I don't know why it cut it off, but I went ahead and answered already. So I put in for this summer, I had some travel, short gardening and some transitions happening professionally. Great. Oh, family togetherness. That's a great one. Moving. Oh dear. Fantastic. Well, I like that answer. That's a good answer. I'm glad you had a fantastic summer. Busy. It seems to be pretty common. Time with, yeah, a couple of people that spent time with their kids. Teaching. Oh, I guess if you're teaching, you don't really have much of a summer. Or renovated a bathroom. Oh no, that's in the chat. That sounds very stressful. Oh, Hawaii. Nice. Oh, camping. Yeah. Over. Yeah, I know. Our summer, we used to say, oh, we'll do all this stuff in the summer. Now we have CCCOER. We keep having more and more programs during the summer. It keeps us very busy. Grandsons and museums. That sounds like fun. All right. Practicing some tunes with fellow musicians, playing through the real book, reading about what the devil consciousness is, etc. I don't know what that means, Patrick, but sounds interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories about, what the heck it is. Is it the underpinning of all that exists, or is it an emergent property of evolution? Our brains just construct it as we evolve. So, it's kind of on the fringes of what we can think about as to what reality actually is.
Wow, okay. All right, we've got a lot of family, a lot of travel. A lot of people with summer was too short. Attended a twin festival. All right. Well, it seems like responses are slowing down. So
What were you up to, Debbie, this summer?
Oh, my summer was moving.
Oh, you were
Yeah.
the moving one. Okay.
I was a moving one. Yeah, I empathize with those of you that were moving.
All right. Well, I guess I'll stop sharing and we can keep moving. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, seemed like one of the themes was, can everyone see my screen now?
Yes, but you're not in slideshow yet.
That's something about transcripts. Okay. Yeah, it seems like family was a big focus this summer for people. And of course, that's a wonderful way to re-energize with your family. So I wanted to just mention some of the our U.S. Department of Education, our U.S. Department of Open Education, how's that? Has been very supportive of open education over the last 6 or 7 years. There's been an open textbook pilot program that has run annually and given out lots of millions of dollars each year. I think golly, I'm trying to think of what we're up to now. But it's, geez, and I don't remember, maybe Teresa does, but usually the grants are about $1 to $2 million for consortiums of colleges that work together on projects. We both Liz and I know that Debbie is also involved in one of those in our home states, and usually they're state consortiums, not always though. But the Department of Ed has recognized the importance of this work for our students and for us as educators. And they call it an open educational ecosystem. and involves making learning materials, data, and educational opportunities available freely. And so as you're talking with other faculty who may be new to this, some of the things they talk about the benefits of OER are it increases equity, right? So it levels the playing field in terms of students and affordability. It's an opportunity to keep your content relevant and high quality with that open license. You can make those changes, or you can find materials and incorporate them that are high quality. And it empowers you as an instructor to have control over your class and your content. And it reallocates money from students' pockets into perhaps they are using that in their local community for all of the other costs that involve that a student has, all those living costs, all that supporting their family while they're in school. And open pedagogy, which as I mentioned earlier, is that it's that umbrella term that includes all those inclusive practices. Really, it centers students. That it's a kind of a philosophy, a set of teaching principles and practices that center students in their learning through the use of OER and these open and inclusive practices. So kind of the hallmarks are, is it student-centered? Often it's co-creation, working together, either students working together or you working with your student. It's connected to their lives in some way and culturally relevant and renewable in the sense that this assignment may be reusable by either you as an instructor or also by your students. And many instructors that we work with reuse these assignments. So they talk to their students about, are you comfortable sharing this with an open license for other students to use next semester to see as examples? And many are, not all, but that's a choice for students of their own work. But that makes it renewable. And it's all based on the open license. And here's a wonderful example from California. This is a history professor, Dr. Oliver Rosales. And he works with his students, many of them who are from migrant farming backgrounds, and tells them how important their history is in building our country. Even though their families came very poor to California to get established and have built out our agricultural business. And so he creates a gallery with his students where they tell their migration stories. They include letters from family during that time period and pictures. And I put a link to that gallery here so that you can check that out, which is just really a wonderful slice of important history that doesn't make it into traditional textbooks. And over to you, Liz.
Anna. So what I'm going to talk is, making learning relevant, contextualization. So that's relating this subject matter to, your students' lives. And this has been shown to motivate students, increase their confidence, enthusiasm, and it makes them more interested in the subject long term. Next slide. So you may think, well, that sounds good, but how do we do that? So one way is to diversify your images. And this is important for several reasons. One is representational justice. OER often is said to be sort of increase equity because it's a free textbook. But if you're just recreating the publisher textbooks in terms of diversity and those sorts of things, that's not necessarily an improvement. And one example of a textbook not being diverse is a dermatology, a medical textbook, where only 4.5% of textbook images were of people with dark skin. And this definitely, you could see how this would have real world consequences, as doctors are not trained on what skin conditions look on darker skin. Next slide. So, what do we mean by diverse images? So you can see we've got some Black women who are in a science setting. We've got people of different genders, ethnicities. I don't know if you can see very well, but the bottom left photo is someone with a prosthetic leg. So just all sorts of different images.
Yeah.
Next slide. And so you may think, well, where the heck do I find these? And so I know there's a lot on the slide, but this list was started because, oh, I didn't see the right hand. So on that community email list that Una talked about earlier, someone asked, where do you go to find DEI images? And so this is the list that came up, and I'm going to put a link to a handout that has this and even more. On this list, a couple that are really popular are Nappy, has a lot of beautiful pictures of Black and brown people, and a lot of people like the women of color in tech link. That's good. Just pick if you want a picture of someone in a meeting or using a computer, just things like that. Next slide. And then the topic of finding resources for diversity images was so popular that I went to OEG Connect, which is the site for Open Education Global Discussion Forum, and found a couple more. Wiki Loves Africa is beautiful pictures from across Africa, all sorts of different things. You can see this woman looking at a microscope. There's also something called Humans, which is for those who are more graphically inclined, you can download different icons and mix and match them. Next slide. So in addition to just pictures, there's also case studies. So one example that was shared at one of our webinars was Butte College's Human Biology OER textbook. It has case studies throughout. And so next slide. So the authors, this is what the one of the case studies looked like before. It's about wearing high heels and about pain in the balls of the person's feet. And as you can see, they use a stock photo of a light-skinned person. And next slide. And so they changed it up. They got a different picture with darker skinned people. They changed the name, and they changed the gender of the person. It's still this, but it's still the same case study. Next one. Another way is localization. So this is an example from California, because that's where I'm based. That's where a lot of the people I work with are from. So in College of the Canyons in Southern California, as part of a zero textbook cost degree grant program, they created this textbook, and it's water supply and demand in California, which is obviously a big topic. And so there's throughout this textbook, there are lots of examples, but just one I pulled out is the water development projects. This is like the Los Angeles Aqueduct, the Central Valley Project. And so this picture is from the textbook, and it's of the aqueduct. Next slide. And then another example, which Debbie Baker shared with me, this is from the Maricopa Community Colleges. And so you might be saying, okay, that example from California is all very well and good, but you don't have the time or the resources to update an entire textbook. So this is a geology textbook, and so I don't think it was adapted, but most of the textbook is relevant to most areas, but they added these backyard geology case studies. This particular one I pulled out is uranium in the Grand Canyon, which Maricopa is in the Phoenix, Arizona area, so pretty close to the Grand Canyon. And so this one, in the chapter on nuclear energy, they include the history of uranium mining and the environmental impacts on the local indigenous people. Some of the other ones they talk about is like hot springs in the chapter on volcanoes, and they tie in things with the Navajo Nation and water rights. With soil, they talk about indigenous agriculture and different architecture that was developed. So all sorts of things like that. Was there a question before, or I don't
I think
see
Ed raised
anything?
his hand. but you took your hand down, Ed. So I'm gonna.
Well,
yes.
yeah, no, I was gonna ask, Una, you had, and before we started this part, you had mentioned about doing the videos with the students. You may be covering this later on. Is there some type of like a formal release that we have to get from the students and have to be able to keep on file to show that they did approve the use of this for in perpetuity for OER, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
That's a good question. And I think I'll let Debbie answer that because she's at an institution and we are not. So Debbie, would you like to answer that?
Sure, I will do my best. So regarding videos and including students in videos and having students develop videos for use, typically my experience has been that there is at the institution itself a common form for that type of video release. You may talk with your marketing. I know for Maricopa that form is really owned by our marketing department. And so you would want to have students complete that. In terms of the Creative Commons piece, once students place that license on their work, they're giving permission for use of that work, right? They're openly licensing their work, and they, in order to do that with the students, you want to provide information to them about the Creative Commons licenses and what that would mean for the students. And of course, give students the choice of whether or not they want to openly license their work.
Okay,
Does
so
that help?
Yeah, so we'd work with our marketing because I know they'll have it for marketing purposes, but we may have to have something, slightly amended for OER purposes.
Yeah, so with the OER, my understanding is that once it has a Creative Commons license on it, that in effect gives the student giving permission for extended use, right? So I don't know of a separate form simply for applying Creative Commons licenses, but definitely for video release, there's a form.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you,
Oh,
Debbie. Thanks for asking.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
think we're gonna go to.
So we're going to jump into student identities. So localization, contextualization, adapting for things like backyard geology, all of those are most effective for student engagement when taking into account the various types of student identities. So for example, with the backyard geology, they were considering, okay, our students are in Arizona, we're going to provide examples in Arizona. So you want to take into account the various types of student identities and how they factor into the individual students that make up a whole class. Here's a brief list of possible student identities, but what other identities might be present in your classroom? Go ahead and drop those into the chat if you want to, because there are so many different identities that students have. Get to know your students as individuals as well as students and build relationships with them to humanize the curriculum and develop community. As educators, we are often passionate about our subject areas and eager to impart knowledge about the subject area and foster that same level of passion and interest in the students. But the reality is that at least in my experience, students typically work either for a much needed grade in a required course or because they formed a connection with a person. And how you determine your students' identities and build a connection with them happens when you talk to them, you ask them, you survey them, and not just once, but maybe throughout the course around different things, and you get to know their interests, their goals, their ambitions, their anxieties, so that you can work with that and you can address those things. I've used exit tickets pretty effectively as an end of class formative assessment, both to glean what students have learned, as well and respond to their questions, but also to individualize those responses, and so that students understand that they're not just submitting an exit ticket, they're going to get something back that will help them to move forward. One thing, another identity here, or one of the things on here is working student is kind of embedded in there. Did you know that 69% of community college students work for pay, and some of those are working 2 jobs, and that's from a 2020 study done by the Center for Community College Student Engagement. So open educational resources can be designed to integrate and honor students' life and work experiences, and leveraging the adaptability of open educational resources to contextualize your course content can explore how students experience those various identities as they're learning. Next slide. Okay, so culturally responsive pedagogy is one teaching approach that complements the adaptability encouraged within the use of open educational resources. You've probably heard of culturally relevant pedagogy, or maybe you're already familiar with it. Zaretta Hammond, in her book about culturally responsive pedagogy in the brain, talks about 3 levels of culture. She talks about the surface level, the shallow level, and the deep level, and provides 2 visual metaphors for those levels. So that surface level is very much the tip of the iceberg, the things that are seen above the water there, the fruit of the tree, the leaves, all those things that come out of it, while the shallow level is the piece just below the water on the iceberg, or the trunk and branches of the tree, and then the deep level is the part below all of that, right? That's the really deeply connected pieces. And when you look at these 3 levels of culture and how those affect learning, open education allows you to tap into those 3 levels of culture, and makes it possible to use those levels to spark imagination, to build engagement, to connect emotion to learning, which is where we know learning happens the most in the brain, is when it's connected to some sort of strong emotion, and to incorporate things like images, quotes, poetry, and cross-disciplinary connections, and to help students make connections across courses. So if you want to know more about specifically how culturally responsive teaching and open education connect, there is a resource, and this is, I think, the resource that Liz dropped in the chat for us. This resource was collected and curated by the open education community during Open Ed Week in 2023. And this work was led by and continues to be managed by MIT's Open Courseware program, Merlot, and participating HBCUs. So next slide. Okay, universal design. So again, another aspect of teaching that you may be very familiar with, but universal design is by nature inclusive, and the flexibility afforded by OER really provides opportunities for universal design. Here, universal design is usually or often associated with making accommodations for students with disabilities, and it also optimizes access of learning for all students. So this is beyond, it includes providing captions on videos, but it goes far beyond that. And it includes options for recruiting interest through individual choice, autonomy, relevance, value. It includes creating a safe learning environment and varying levels of emotional risk for students. Think about how you might allow students to choose assignment topics or group members. Those are things that tie very well into universal design. Universal design for learning provides options for comprehension, activating and supplying background knowledge, things like that, all of which connects back to the flexibility afforded by open education. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Both, so here's a look at the framework, the complete framework. This is a screenshot. And so you can see that it crosses the 3 columns of providing for multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression, but then each cell within that, so things like recruiting interest, language and symbols, expression and comprehension, or communication, I'm sorry, self-regulation, all of those cells within that provide specifics and strategies. And then if you were to access this framework through the website that is linked there, you'll find even more strategies and resources and research around how that happens. So there's a question: when we're making sure materials are accessible to students, how do we make sure not to overstep or single out individuals by our designs? Well, so that's one of the things that universal design does, is you build those that accessibility in from the get-go, so that everybody has access to the pieces that are accessible, not just that 1 or 2 person that needs it. And so that if you're, I'll just go for that very fundamental access level of providing transcripts. Providing transcripts helps everybody, not just somebody who has a hearing disability. And so you want to try to provide that up front, not react. But there is a wealth of things here within universal design that allows for that open education really provides opportunities to make possible. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Una. Oh, did I freeze? Una?
Sorry, did I freeze? Can you hear me?
Debbie,
Yeah.
your picture's frozen, but we still can hear you. Okay. Una, you're fine.
Okay.
I think maybe Debbie's gone though. Maybe now.
Oh, is Debbie gone? Okay, so this is more about the UDL and how it goes into the various parts of the brain. And I'm sorry, I don't have her notes with me, but it looks at where in the brain gets stimulated. I guess she's coming back in a minute. Where it gets stimulated and how learners stay engaged and motivated. And I think she's trying to talk about how there's a science behind this, and you as instructors are aware of engagement and motivation, and but to give you that there's a scientific background if you're not familiar with that, and I'm not completely familiar with this myself. And then also there's an area of the brain that's motivated when we see, hear, and read. And finally, the how of learning, how we organize and express our ideas, and those are all occurring in different parts of our brain. Important when you're working with an instructional designer. And I know Teresa Flett gets to help you with instructional design from time to time. And
Oh, no, I don't. But OEL does. Yes, we have some great instructional designers on campus though.
Okay, Una, I'm back. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. but I'm back. So
Okay.
this was really simply to show how universal design is based on research for how learning happens in the brain, and that by tapping into that is itself an inclusive practice.
Okay, I covered it really badly. We'll move
Oh,
on.
I'm sure you did beautifully. Okay. So I will go very, very quickly. So student voice and student choice. This is, I mean, you know, open, if you're familiar with the 5 R's with open educational resources, you know that they promote the use of and provide opportunities for student voice and choice in their learning. These two concepts are frequently intertwined and not easily separated, and play a role in providing for inclusive practices. As faculty, building student choices into the curriculum in advance makes a whole lot of sense. And that is really where universal design can come into play, because you're doing that in advance. Differentiated instruction strategy proposes choices happen across 4 areas. So content, process, product, and environment. So, you know, choices of and providing choices in a variety of ways and places is engaging for students, right? We all like to have choices in what we're doing. And in contrast, incorporating student voice happens when, upon listening to the students' interests, anxieties, goals, fears, challenges, ambitions, passions, the faculty adjusts to take those things into account. So how and what the faculty adjusts depends on the information provided by the students and what the faculty interpreted from that information, because those aren't always the same thing, and what the faculty is realistically willing and able to adjust, right? Because you can't change it all, and you certainly can't change it all for all things, but incorporating that student voice really requires that active listening and sometimes hearing what isn't said. And the adaptability of open provided by those 5 R's provides the flexibility, responsiveness, and agility to make changes in order to respond to student voice. Now, you can certainly build that in upfront and provide those options, like know that there are certain places where you're going to allow for student voice. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh my gosh, this is what happened last time.
Are you still with
Oh,
us?
here we
Debbie?
go. Yes. All right. So promoting student voice and choice. So culturally responsive pedagogy, universal design for learning. These can absolutely be used without open educational resources, and faculty can use open educational resources without doing culturally responsive pedagogy or universal design for learning. Using OER doesn't mean faculty have to change what they're doing in the classroom, but using OER provides a flexibility and opportunity for customization and a responsiveness that may not be available with the traditional publisher textbook. Remember those 69% of students who are working for pay. For them, the affordability of OER, setting aside all that customization, is itself inclusive. However, if you choose to embrace the adaptability of open education, consider promoting student voice and choice within or alongside the open resource. What do you as the faculty need to decide, and what can you allow students to decide? And what can faculty and students in your course decide together? And when you're ready to do so, because you don't have to jump right straight to it, but when you're ready to do so, consider co-creating materials with students, as might happen with an open pedagogy assignment. And then the following slide, go ahead and go to the next slide, provides some examples of published student co-constructed textbooks. And these are, we don't have time, we certainly don't have time since my computer crashed there. Here are a couple of examples of how faculty and students worked together to co-create knowledge in different ways. One is a collection of student essays. Another is a collection of student work to provide resources for a local middle school during the pandemic. And having the opportunity to be published authors in one way or another can absolutely be a motivating factor for student engagement. Okay, Una, over to you.
Great. Well, very quickly, because I want to get us into our breakout rooms. You know, a lot of this is about creating a sense of belonging in the classroom for our students so that they feel that they have a right to be there and that they can be successful in your classroom. And you can read this slide at your leisure if you choose to, but the thing I want to focus on really quickly is examine the history of your discipline. And that's why I also asked you to specify what your discipline was. Ask how knowledge is defined and accepted and who gets to have a voice in that discipline. And so many of your students may not see themselves in some of those experts that are quoted and are featured in textbooks. So try to include voices and perspectives from many people and groups and invite students to contribute their own perspectives and experiences and how important that is to not only the study of the discipline, but to life in general. And I have a couple of wonderful examples about science. So it matters who does science. The people that do it bring their own biases to the science. That's just part of being human. So one of our instructors in another program did a diverse biologist biographies assignment. And there's a wonderful site here that you can go to where her students created the biographies. They got to choose which scientists they wanted to feature. And it's a non-traditional scientist. And you can see that there's just a really wide variety of scientists out there that we don't hear about. This is from a professor, an education professor in the Los Angeles area. And she asked, why are all the white males? And she said, well, we respect their contributions to the theories. Why aren't there more voices out there? And so she worked with her students on creating biographies of pedagogical theorists and teacher educators. And here's just a couple of wonderful examples. I hope some of you know these people. Professor Kyoko Kishimoto. She's at Minnesota State University at St. Cloud. Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, just an eminent American pedagogical theorist who coined the term culturally relevant pedagogy 30 years ago. And Dr. Paul Hernandez, who's at Achieving the Dream and a recognized leader in college access and support former faculty, and has written an excellent book on a pedagogy of real talk and how to work with students. So those voices are out there, those experts are out there. Try and include them so that your students can see themselves in class. And finally, one of our members, College of DuPage, has a library page on finding scholarship written by diverse authors. Is that a find? So big thanks to College of DuPage Library for this. They give examples. I was playing with it myself yesterday. You can simply use Google to do some searches and you can find examples of diverse scholars in your discipline. All right. So we want to jump into some breakout rooms. I think I did that in record time. Liz, give us some advice on how to get into the breakout rooms.
All right. Well, we have 3 breakout rooms. You should be able to pick your breakout room. So we've got Finding Inclusive Resources, which I'll be running, Student Choice with Debbie Baker, and Diverse Scholars with Una. So I see some people are already going in. If you're going into the Finding Inclusive Resources, it'll take me a minute to get into there.
Don't leave just yet. Oh, I see. We hit the join button under the appropriate one. All right. We'll see you in there. At this point, Teresa, this is a question for you. We were hoping to have about 15 minutes in there, but we're going to hit the half hour where it ends. So do you want us to come back out? We had hoped to share some highlights, but I'm not sure we'll have time, or we could make the breakouts 10 minutes.
Let's do breakouts 10 minutes so they have time to just kind of gather back together again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So we will close those. And Liz, is that something you can do? You can close in 10 minutes?
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the clock.
Okay. Thanks so much.